Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our hydrogen talk, the first one in 2026. Happy New Year, by the way, for the remaining months and 11 months to come. And we will start to discuss about money and about transport. Our topic today is 100 billion euro for green fuels. What STIP, the Sustainable Transport Investment Plan, means for aviation and shipping. My name is Yorgos Chatzimarkakis. I am the CEO of Hydrogen Europe, and we are very happy with this H2 talk to contribute to the discussion about everything hydrogen. Now, on 5th of November, so quite recently, the European Commission presented its STIP, the Sustainable Transport Investment Plan, to accelerate the energy transition of aviation and maritime transport sectors. Two important sectors. Mario Draghi, in his report, has clearly marked them as important sectors also for the industrial base in Europe and having the potential of being very innovative. Under the plan, the EU is expected to mobilize nearly 3 billion euro until the end of 2027. There are several different pockets and instruments to do that. There's an ESAF Early Movers Coalition. This is a pilot project that has been presented by EU Commissioner Titi Kostas. And there is a clear commitment of 8 member states. It has been launched 4th of December. We are quite proud of it, and I will especially mention Laurent Dancel in our team, who worked on this project even before he started with Hydrogen Europe, and it's super successful. There, the budget is 500 million for synthetic aviation fuel projects, so ESAF. Then we have 2 billion, the biggest chunk in InvestEU. InvestEU is basically the bigger pocket for sustainable alternative fuels until 2027. In order to help bridge financial gaps, we will talk about these gaps later on. The Commission will also allocate 300 million by the end of this year to support the production of hydrogen for sustainable aviation, SAF and maritime, as MF we call it, fuels through the European Hydrogen Bank. So there has been a specific portfolio for maritime projects in the last tender of the Hydrogen Bank, with also responses from the business world. Could have been more, we will discuss. And then there is Horizon Europe. Horizon Europe has, in our case, the Clean Hydrogen Partnership, where we have support for R&I projects, research innovation, with a budget of 133 million. And last but not least, the Commission will mobilize 153 million for synthetic aviation fuel projects and 293 million for maritime projects in the Innovation Fund. So a lot of different possibilities. And these new instruments put in place by STIP also include an intermediary mechanism connecting fuel producers and buyers. We will hear later on more about this by the European Commission. However, how does this connect to the overarching and bigger ambition of ETS reform? We know that the transport sectors should be included. Will there be a connection to the mother of all sustainability legislation, which is the ETS? Will there be something like conditional allowances for early movers? I say this already in the beginning because we might come back to it several times. It's important to understand how we can reduce the risk of the producers or also of the off-takers. And last but not least, I mentioned the Early Movers Coalition. This is a double-sided auction. It's the model of H2 Global. This is the German model, which now becomes very much European with this Early Movers Alliance. Is that a model that can be basically seen by others as a role model. In order to discuss all that, we are very glad to have in our H2 Talk today two members of parliament. Jeannette Ballieu, she is from the Netherlands, and she also is in the ENVI committee, the environmental committee. Jeannette represents in parliament the Renew group, and we will listen to her now before we come later on to Jan-Christoph Oetjen, who is also an MEP, but I will present him after the opening address from Jeannette that we will show you now.
Good afternoon, and thank you to Hydrogen Europe for organizing this important H2 Talk webinar. It's a pleasure to address you on the future of Europe's sustainable fuels and discuss financing solutions to decarbonize the aviation and maritime sectors. Just last Friday, I visited Power2X in Rotterdam, where they are building what will become the largest sustainable aviation fuel facility in Europe. This plant will produce over 250,000 tons of eSAF per year, with up to 90% lower CO2 emissions compared to conventional aviation fuels. Seeing this demonstrated the potential when companies dare to invest in clean fuels and new molecules. Given the Netherlands' role as major European logistic hub, e-fuels for maritime and aviation are a big opportunity for the Netherlands and a key player to accelerate decarbonization of both transport sectors. However, with the upcoming EU reviews, businesses are hesitant to make final investment decisions. Financing a project like Power2X is a long-term commitment, often 7 to 8 years from investment to production. If we want these fuels and the hydrogen to be available at scale in 2030, we need clarity now, production mandates, targets and incentives. This is where the European Commission's Sustainable Transport Investment Plan comes into play, with a target of producing 20 million tons of renewable and low carbon fuels in 2035. This helps de-risk private investments, which is crucial as additional investments from the private sector will be needed to decarbonize transport. The STIP also introduces another key element of the de-risking private investments through the intermediary mechanism. This instrument helps connect fuel producers and buyers, provide revenue certainty and investment stability. Hydrogen and advanced synthetic fuels are not only decarbonization tools, they can also serve as an energy storage solution, enhancing Europe's energy security and self-sufficiency, while providing dual-use applications for civil and military purposes. Boosting the production and uptake of renewable and low-carbon fuels is essential for the resilience and decarbonization of Europe and helps generate European jobs. In the Netherlands alone, more than 3,000 jobs are related to the shipping sector, which generates over 94 billion in revenue every year. For the aviation sector, there are an additional 100,000 jobs, more than the maritime sector, with the aviation sector contribution to over 3.5 points of the GDP, which is why I'm pleased to see that the Netherlands has joined the eSAF Early Movers Coalition with 7 other member states that are committed to scaling up eSAF production. STIP instruments, InvestEU, the European Hydrogen Bank and the Innovation Fund provide tools to de-risk investments and accelerate deployment of sustainable fuels for both the maritime and the aviation sector. I look forward to today's discussion with the experts, industry and finance to explore how we can unlock Europe's 100 billion opportunity for green fuels, accelerating the energy transition and ensure Europe remains a global leader in sustainable aviation and maritime fuels. So thank you, and I wish you a productive and inspiring webinar.
Danke wel. Many thanks to Jeannette. And that leads me to her colleague, Jan-Christoph Oetjen, who is one of the leading, if not the leading, personalities with regards to the transport sector in the European Parliament. Jan-Christoph has been in Parliament since 2019. he was vice chair of the Transport Committee, and where he still is very actively involved. And he is basically the connoisseur on all these things. Thanks, Jan Christoph, for being with us today. And you have the floor for your introductory remarks.
Yes, thank you, Jorgo, for inviting me to your webinar. I think it's crucial that we start discussing the STIP and looking into what is needed more, or where it goes into the wrong direction, or where it goes into the right direction. And I must say, to start, that the analysis that Commission has done is the right one. We have a gap in between the production on the one hand and the market uptake and the needs in the fuel production in Europe, and we need to address this this gap. And obviously, today we know that the mandates that we have put in place in Refuel Aviation and Fuel EU Maritime, that those mandates are not enough. It's not sufficient just to have the mandates, and the tools that we have at hand, that we have put in place during the Green Deal discussions and legislation, are not sufficient in order to boost the production of alternative fuels in Europe. And even for SAF, so sustainable aviation fuels, the tool of SAF allowances that I invented and that we have put in place into the ETS aviation regulation is not a sufficient driver for the market uptake and for long time contracts between those who buy the sustainable aviation fuels and those who produce the aviation fuels. So Jeanette rightly pointed out, we have this uncertainty in the market, and we have this situation that we have production projects inside the European Union, a lot of them, which is good, but what we are lacking are the final investment decisions. So what we need to create, from my understanding, is this certainty that those investment decisions don't go into stranded investments, but that there will be a return on investment for those who want to go into the production of sustainable aviation fuels and alternative fuels for the maritime sector as well. I think the STIP gives the right answer, partly in the sense that the double-sided auction system can be a good tool in order to mitigate the long-term needs for those who want to invest into production capacity, and the short-term wishes from airlines and other uptakers of alternative fuels. So I pretty much appreciate that Commission is going into this direction and uses, as you just mentioned, this tool developed by H2 Global for this double-sided auction system. On the other hand, we pretty much rely with this STIP on member state money. So we give not much of EU money into the STIP. Fortunately, there's this early movers coalition. The Netherlands are part. Jeanette mentioned that Germany is part of it, and other member states. And we need this member state money in order to kickstart the production, in order to bridge this gap of investment certainty. And so I think that we do a good step into this direction. What is missing, from my understanding, is that we need for aviation a more flexible system. FuelEU Maritime is more flexible than Refuel EU Aviation. And in Refuel EU Aviation, there is already a call for a book and claim system. And we can discuss if we need this book and claim system only for the ESEF part, or if we need it for the whole of the alternative fuels that are available on the market. But I think this tool of book and claim could help starting, especially those who want to invest, which are not the big incumbents, but which are startups, which are scale-ups and newbies on this in this market, could help them being competitive and finding their place in the market. So I pretty much call for a European book and claim system, not a global one, because I want the investments to happen inside the European Union, but it would help or give additional flexibility. I think as well that this tool that we have put in place in ETS Aviation, the SAF allowances, that we should broaden this. We have put in place 20 million allowances. Today, I would say we were too shy at that moment. We should think about broadening it, giving more access to SAF allowances, and maybe change as well the system in the sense that the allowances are attributed quite late in the process. And what we should look at as well is how to use this tool for the maritime sector, because there's no free allowances attribution in the maritime sector. And I think that this could help in the maritime sector as well. So this, together with the 150 million for synthetic aviation fuel and roughly 300 million for maritime fuel projects in the innovation fund, could, from my understanding, really help kickstarting this industry. But what we need as well is an agreement between the fuel producers on the one side, the shippers and the aviation industry on the other side, to really try to fulfill the targets. There are very quickly, there will be the revision of FuelEU Maritime and RefuelEU Aviation, and there might be a call to lower the targets, but I'm one of those who would like to defend the targets and who does not want to touch those targets, but who wants to fulfill them. And we still have this window of opportunity, as one might say, this time frame where we could be able to fulfill those targets. But if we don't get those final investment decisions very soon, we are running into a situation where those targets cannot be met physically, because the production capacity will not be there if the investments don't start. That's why it's now or never. And I think that we should give a good push for aviation, synthetic aviation fuels and alternative fuels for maritime, in order to follow the decarbonization path that has been set out during the debates on the Green Deal. And with this, I would finish my introductory part. And if I shall add something, or if you have questions, please don't hesitate. Thank you.
Vielen Dank. Many thanks, Jan Christoph. First of all, we appreciate very much that you want to stick to the targets. I think this is super important. Investors need an expectability of things, and that is why we shouldn't water down things. That's our targets. That's number one. But you also alluded to the differences between the two mechanisms and the missing flexibility. Can I ask, do you see any possibility to change that? We saw during the European Green Deal, which was a very, very massive process, we remember. And as it was so massive, we sometimes overlooked things because we were in a rush. Do you think, together with the European Commission, you as a parliament can push in order to get these flexibilities? For instance, the double-sided auction also in maritime, or the book and claim system. I hear you and I fully understand you. And I think it's a very, very good way to include non-European geographies, which are a little bit more advanced in production, into this whole process. Do you think there's a possibility to change this still?
Well, I think so, and I hope so, because there are, and it's pretty interesting if you look at the process, and you are right, and you lived it through it as well in the past. You have different teams that are working on different regulations, and in one team they have a good idea, they put it in place, and in the other team they have another good idea, but they're not the same good ideas. So we had the good idea of putting in place SAF allowances for aviation, and today I would say we need them as well for maritime. So we need to copy this, and at the same time, in the maritime regulation, you have a higher flexibility on how to reach the targets and on the time frame, and you don't have those steps that are foreseen in Refuel EU Aviation. And I think we should learn for aviation from what has been done in maritime and kind of smoothen this approach. On the other hand, book and claim is something that is already requested since a long time, and unfortunately, Commission until now is very hesitating in putting in place a book and claim system. And you know how it is. What the Commission does not present, we cannot discuss on it and vote on it. So we're waiting on a proposal for a book and claim system. And interestingly enough, this is something the industry on the one hand is pushing for, but as well Transport and Environment and other NGOs are pushing for it. So there's a common call from both sides, and I think it's the right thing to do. And indeed, you could think about how to put this in place for maritime as well, and that is the same for the double-sided auction system. If this works well for SAF, we could look into it on how to use this for maritime, even though in maritime you have different technology options for shipping, a little bit different than to aviation, where it's pretty much clear that it's linked to liquid fuels. This can be different in maritime, but yes, we should learn from the good things in the one sector and the other sector, and the two sectors should think the development of alternative fuels together.
There's one question in our chat that goes into the direction of the double auction system that we know from H2 Global and from this early mover alliance. The question is, given the current budgets of the different member states, it is not certain that early movers will all allocate a dedicated budget. In the UK, they are looking at an CFD system, so contract for difference system. What do you think about this? CFD?
So if double-sided auction system doesn't work early, we could think about contract for difference as well. I would prefer the double-sided auction system, but I think we're in a state where we should try to use what is working and what is available, because we have no time to lose. It's more about getting the things done now, because if we don't get the things done now, we will run into a situation where we cannot meet the targets.
Excellent, understood. Last question, short question. It's about, a two-speed Europe. So in the early mover coalition, we saw, I say the usual suspects are there. We heard from Jeanette already some good words about the Netherlands. The Netherlands is indeed always leading in these fields, but wouldn't have wouldn't had Germany put a lot of money in that first wave, Luxembourg, by the way, also with them, we would have had a hard time. So do we risk a two-speed Europe here? Did you feel something like that also from the talks you have in the European Parliament? Because the constituents there represent all of Europe and only few are active. What's your take here?
Yeah, it's a difficult question, to be honest, and we might be running into this situation. Think of electrification of the automotive sector. We already have a two-speed Europe between, let's say, Central Western European countries and Eastern European countries, where you have different approaches, or not different approach, but different speeds. And we might be running into the same situation on fuels as well. But I'm a positive optimist, right? So I'm happy about those who give money and who start and who do the right things, and I don't complain about those who trade behind, because I want to see things moving. So, but yes, we might be running into this situation. One reason more why we, I think, especially at the beginning, we need this book and claim system, so that we can use the fuels where they're produced. And indeed, the Netherlands are a front runner on this, with the Port of Rotterdam, who is a big, not only logistic hub, it's a big energy hub as well for Europe. So we should use this power for the whole of the continent.
Well, on book and claim in the chat, there is a hint that the European Commission has launched a study on that. You're fully aware, and the study, of course, will be ready in 2028. Congratulations. That's too late, correct?
Yes, it's so I'm happy that they started the study. I don't want to be misunderstood, but honestly, we had the discussions on book and claim already during the negotiations of Refuel EU Aviation. There was a majority of the Parliament putting a request into the Refuel EU Aviation regulation that was supported by the member states. That was a request to the Commission to draw up a book and claim system and to present it to us. Now we're in the time where we look into the revision, and they start a study. So I think indeed they are very late, but better late than never.
Thanks very much. Vielen Dank nochmal, Jan Christoph. Maybe I should use that moment to hint to the speech of your Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, in Davos, who said that this late developments and this slow pace becomes a bottleneck. And as a Chancellor, he criticized very much some of these developments in Europe for the first time. For the first time, we heard that from such a high level. Well, we will see. Also, watch how you try to push the European Commission, which we will hear now, to accelerate the pace. Thanks very much indeed, Jan Christoph, and looking forward to discuss that with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to show you, first of all, this is eSAF. In this case, it's e-diesel, but it could be e-kerosene, which would be eSAF. This is how it looks like. It's like water. It smells. Well, it smells not like diesel, this one here. It's not something you would like to smell all night, but it exists. So this is here produced by one of our members, Ineratec in that case, and it's doable. Whether or not this will be profitable one day, and whether or not it contributes to our European resilience, being less dependent on imported fuels, because we can produce these fuels our own, that we will discuss right now with the following participants. And I would welcome here, gallery view, the list of our participants. Yeah, this is our panel discussion for today with Annika Krohn. She's head of unit in the Maritime Transport and Logistics Department of DG Move, the part of the European Commission taking care of this, like Eddie. He's also in DG Move. Eddie Liégeois. He's head of unit for aviation at the European Commission. So we have maritime and aviation represented here by heads of units. Thanks very much. Then we have Mahesh Roy. He is the ESAF director at the Green Finance Institute. Sandra Winter-Martzen. She is director synthetic fuels at Topsoe, one of the producers and one of our strong members. And another very strong member, Mueve, represented by Olivia Infantes Morales. She is the director hydrogen regulation. And without further ado, I would like to come to Annika. She is, as I said, she's in the Mobility and Transport Directorate General, and she is responsible for sustainable maritime policy, maritime markets, and international maritime agreements, as well as digitalization and sustainability in intermodal freight, transport, and logistics, economist by training. And I would like to start with you, Annika. What were the main reasons behind the reactions of the Commission to the Sustainable Transport Investment Plan? And how will the Commission ensure that such encouragement will be actionable and help to close the funding gap for the sustainable maritime fuels? Annika, you're from Estonia. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Jorgo, for inviting, and thank you for giving me the floor here. Okay, obvious reason for launching the STIP is to back up the EU transport decarbonization agenda. As you said, that Fit for 55 package was big and it was fast, but we have to now make it work. If the transport sector does not decarbonize fast, the EU cannot meet its 2030, 2040 targets. It's the question of our credibility. And to be very clear, what's proposed in Fit for 55 for maritime and aviation, it was not let's say, regulation as usual. It was a generational industrial shift, which was mandated in those two regulations, FuelEU Maritime and Refuel Aviation, to shift away from fossil fuels. And these are the hardest to abate sectors. And what it means in practice, what we clearly realize is that it means billions in infrastructure, technology, and fuel investments. It means that industry must reconfigure fleets, bunkering system, uplifting system, energy supply, everything. And STIP now brings all these elements together. Recognize this major challenge and then take stock of everything, all tools, levers we have our hands to actually achieve it. It's what we have now or what could we have in the future. And I refer here to ongoing negotiation on multi-annual financial framework and negotiations on this package, as well as upcoming ETS revision. We have to see how we can assist the industry. And of course, also mentioned by Jeanette Pallieu earlier, the less obvious but fundamentally important reason is to ensure Europe's strategic energy independence. And then your second part of the question, how we make it happen. Okay, it's just very rigid, dedicated, and firm follow-up of these 30 plus actions that we announced in the STIP, and that's where we're departing now.
Thank you very much. Excellent. So it's just the starting point.
Yeah.
And I'll come back to you. But first we go to Eddie. Eddie Liégeois, who is, as I have understood, from Liège. He's the head of the Aviation Policy Unit since January 25, and wants to help the EU policy to promote a competitive, connected, and sustainable European aviation market for both air services and airport-related services. He was head of the transport networks and has been working with the Director General very closely for many, many years. So an expert, and he knows everything about eSAF and aviation very well. Eddie, what's your take? So we have here in your case the EU SAF mandate and the Refuel EU legislation, which is now in place for a year. What are the lessons out of your perspective so far? And what are the challenges remaining? By the way, also, what's the forecast for the eSAF market out of your perspective? There are a lot of questions already in the chat related to eSAF. We'll come back to that in a second round. But the interest is amazingly high. Eddie, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, but perhaps I first to correct two things. First of all, I'm not from Liège. It's true that I'm Belgium, but not from Liège. And I have also to correct a second element that was mentioned, I think, by you on the book and claim. Indeed, we will come back on that later in the discussion. I would say that until the STIP was published, the question to the Commission was whether we should have a book and claim mechanism. I think that it was more clear now in the STIP that I would say, why not? And let's look how we can build this mechanism. And the study that we are conducting together with EASA, I would say the outcome, the results are due for basically the second trimester of this year. So definitely we will see how it means in terms of legislation, but we really wish, and our perspective is really to have clarity on this possible mechanism this year. Then we will see how to implement it, but definitely it's not the intention to only come in 2028 with something which could be put in place. Yes, on your question, I'm a bit like Mr. Oetjen. I'm someone who is, I would say, reasonably optimistic, and let's a little bit look at what we have already done so far, in particular, thanks to the refuel to the mandate. In fact, a few years ago, there was simply no SAF. It was inexistent. And what we see is that in 2025, there was no problem to meet the 2% target. We are even well above this target. We also see, and it's in particular highlighted in the report of EASA on the SAF market, that in principle, based on the project which are on the table, there should be no problem to meet the second target in 2030, 6%. We have to, for sure, to look at the evolution of the market, but let's say the prospects are very positive. And something which was also mentioned by Mr. Oetjen, and there the Parliament was very strong in the negotiation, and it's very positive. We have SAF alliances, which I would say worked well in 2025 for the purchase made by the airlines in 2024, as more than 50 airlines, let's say, used this possibility of alliance for an amount of around 100 million euro. And to give in perspective, the SAF alliance represents until 2030 around 1.6 billion. So I would say that we have already done quite well on that. That being said, there are indeed challenges that we should not ignore them. The first one is synthetic fuels, eSAF. No project have reached FID so far. We will come back on that point later in the discussion on the double-side auction. A second challenge, as I said, 2%, 6% should be fine, but it is also true that the next target in 10 years, and 10 years is not so much when we have in mind the time to implement a new project, the next in 2035 will be 20%, and that's really a challenge, and we will have to look, and perhaps also through legislation, how to make sure that we, let's say, create a progressive demand between 2030 and 2035. Another challenge is, and there are some mention on that in the STIP, that's the price transparency. So that's something which is highly required by the airlines, basically to understand what is the content of, I would say, how the price of SAF is calculated. And perhaps a very last point I would mention is something which is also, I would say, a bit a source of concerns. That's the origin of the feedstocks. And there I would also refer to the report of EASA, which was published in October or November last year, where we see that the majority of these feedstocks comes from outside the EU. Then on your last question, the forecast for ESAF, I would say on the positive side, we have a lot of projects which are in preparation, more than 50 projects. And by the way, Europe is even leader in terms of number of projects which are ready to go, more than half allocated in the EU. But indeed, there are the challenges to make sure that we go to the next step with project which will materialize. And that's where, again, and I will finish with a positive note, we have this coalition of 8 member states and 8 ministers which committed to, I would say, to put together money for, I would say, to support project on synthetic fuels.
Many thanks, Eddie. Sorry for the wrong information. Especially, I'm happy to hear that the study is going to be ready much earlier, and you are on it. By the way, on Monday we had the North Sea Summit in Hamburg, where many of these ministers, I think most of them, were in the room. And I can tell you that, and I talked to some of them, I had the honor to be part of some roundtables there. They are really committed because they also see we will have, especially in the North Sea, when the plan will be implemented, lots of electrons that cannot be put into the power grid. And so that might be one good opportunity to produce the feedstock, so hydrogen in this case, in Europe and not imported from outside Europe. So there is hope that we accelerate the pace. And thanks very much. Also, can I say at this point to your personal involvement, because without your personal support, this Early Movers Alliance would not have worked. So that's also your achievement. However, you mentioned 50 projects in the project pipeline, none of them FID. And let's talk about the reasons. I'll come back to you, Eddie, but I would like to hear now from our next panelist who knows about finances and why investors are not so strong in signing their commitments. That's Mahesh Roy. He is the ESAF director, as I said, in the Green Finance Institute, very well acquainted with all these topics and with Green Finance, with the Green Finances Institute on Sustainable Aviation. He's working at the intersection of industry, finance, and government to unlock private capital and to accelerate advanced SAF and the production across the EU and the UK. Mahesh is basically is somebody who knows very well where the bottlenecks are. Where are they? Where are the bottlenecks, and where could you, Mahesh, try to explain the stumbling blocks in reaching durable offtake agreements? Because this is what the industry is about, long-term and durable agreements. Why are aviation and maritime offtakers different to traditional energy offtakers? And please tell us whether the STIP, with the big amount of money that we just mentioned, can currently help to overcome that situation. What needs to be triggered a little bit more? What is okay already? Please, Mahesh, you have the floor.
Thanks, Jorgo. So as you mentioned, GFI, we advise governments, businesses, and financial institutions on scaling climate and nature solutions, offices in the UK, Europe, and around the world. And within the SAF program that I lead, we're focused on the UK and EU, but our primary focus over the next 12 to 18 months is getting projects to final investment decisions. So that's where we're focusing. In the EU, We operate via Project Sky Power, which many would be acquainted with, where we support our partners Systemic in leading the secretariat there, and we look after the finance working group. We've been working on SAF since the introduction of the mandates across the 2 jurisdictions and have been heavily involved in designing the revenue certainty mechanism in the UK. And we're also supporting our colleagues in Sky Power and feeding industry inputs into the EU design, the design of the EU mechanisms that are being proposed in the STIP. And just to clarify, I'm speaking in my role as GFI and not for Sky Power or its members, but I think first is probably a bit of a view from the ground. Much like Eddie, we do have optimism. There is a significant activity. There's a number of projects with a path to final investment decision in the next few years. And whilst climate is the driving force and net zero and energy security is coming more into focus, and projects have been raising equity, there is investment. Most of the projects in Europe and the UK or the European region are actually generally, they might be backed by bigger players, but generally sort of startup, scale-up businesses. So the investment they require is sort of venture-like in its nature and its risk, but the actual size of the investment required is infrastructure, like hundreds of millions, if not billions of euros. But many of these are receiving investment from institutional investors and other places, grants from the EU Innovation Fund, support from their governments, as was outlined by Jan Christoph as well. So we are seeing interest from financial stakeholders in this fledgling industry, and that's really being driven by the demand signals from their mandate itself. And as outlined here, there is a real opportunity for Europe to be the leader in a new technology and supply chain. But with all disruptive technologies, there is sort of friction in the rate and cost of change, which means that the mandated parties are probably not as active in offtake or investment as everyone might have hoped they would have been, which is sort of led to there being some uncertainty now. All of that said, though, there has been ESAF final investment decisions reached, and in the US, Infinium reached one last year. They're developing even larger plants in the US, and indeed intend to open some in Europe, as far as I'm aware. So the question isn't, will ESAF be available in 2030? Given that, the answer is probably yes. It's, will Europe be the leader? And I guess this year is crucial in whether that's the case. And so to your framing of the question at first, the durable offtake and revenue certainty over several years, that this remains a central factor to bankability. There is no material existing market for second and third generation sustainable aviation fuels, or ESAF in particular. So it's sort of impossible to forecast future prices and accurately predict production cost curves. And this affects those that will be signing those long-term offtakes, because that long-term offtake, 10 to 15 years offtake, is required for these projects, these sort of scale-up startup businesses, to receive commercial project finance, which is key at the levels at the quantum of financial support they require. And so that's why revenue support mechanisms are needed and central, such as the double-sided auctions that have been proposed in the EU and the revenue certainty mechanism in the UK. So there is a balancing act to get this right, but as mentioned by Jan Christoph, to do it very quickly, because there isn't really time to waste in order to get these SAF plants built in time for the mandates. As to why aviation and maritime off-takers are different to traditional energy off-takers, in many other markets, traditional energy off-takers have global price indices and futures markets. And as mentioned before, talking about ESAF versus fossil kerosene and historic prices, etc., we really don't have that information to be able to as far as selling electricity, say, goes into a regulated monopoly, generally via a grid, where there's industry norms and standards and market mechanisms already in place that they're selling into. Whereas these are, two technologies, ship engines and plane engines, that run on a certain type of fuel that's produced in a certain way. And this is a very different pathway to doing it. So there is a difference there. Traditionally, aviation and maritime off-takers do not sign these long-term multi-year offtake agreements that these producers require as well. So that is a new thing for them. The creditworthiness of the off-takers may not be sufficient for banks, many of them, some, of course, but not many of them, maybe not. And also that price uncertainty as well. So, there is a difference, and it is, in when it comes to actually the airlines and the shipping companies, there is a very big shift in the way these commercial agreements are structured, which, of course, as I mentioned before, leads to some friction around, I think many over the long term want to see this change in order for their industries to reach net zero. But the cost and disruption now does create some friction. So, this is a key area that needs to be focused on that can be supported by government mechanisms. And to your point around the 100 billion in investment that's needed, I would say it's not so much the level of public support. There needs to be an amount, but I think you said the type as well. I think it's not so much a number, so much as clear support in areas that matter. And crucially, as yourself and Jan-Christoph highlighted, ongoing policy stability and certainty. Investors don't like, changing their future projections changing based on changes in regulation that has already created the demand signals when they're making these investments. And so the mandates themselves provide these overall demand signals. And it's been really important in stimulating the dozens of ESAF developers in Europe in proposing, building, attracting investment for new ESAF plants. And this, at least for the near future, whilst there is still quite a good chance that the volumes required by 2030 can be produced within the EU, these need to be as certain as possible to attract further investment to make sure those leading projects get to final investment decision. And for revenue support, the double-sided auction is key, the pilot auctions this year. If they are able to unlock final investment decision for those leading projects in the EU who have a pathway, and there are a number of them, to reaching FID late this year or early next year, then that will once again bolster the mandate itself and prove to people that there'll be massive volumes of that bottle of clear, stinky liquid that you held up before available for the mandate, and there is no need to change it. As mentioned, SAF allowances book and claim can play a role. At this stage now to get FIDs across the line, obviously that is, they won't come in time, but they can certainly help develop if those larger SAF plants that have been talked about require billions in investment, public and private, and there's a big pipeline of those. So there will need to be some other mechanisms there as well. The public sector can also drive the market by public procurement. I mentioned before security, so defense is a huge one, a trade, and orchestrating innovative financing structures. And we did work last year focusing not just on sort of durable offtake, but also on project delivery risks. Because these are first of a kind projects, the guarantees and warranties in the commercial contracts for construction and the technology licenses that are generally available to mature technologies aren't available to these startup, scale-up businesses that are trying to attract finance. So organizations like export credit agencies, the European Investment Bank and other development banks, there is a real role for them to play in de-risking this delivery for the first of a kind projects that are coming through. And then as they become nth of a kind towards the end of this decade, there won't need to be as much support there, and the private sector can step in more confidently once that risk has gone away and these plants are scaled up.
Wow, excellent. That's already a lot of explanation what needs to be overcome. Thank you. Mahesh, you mentioned defense, and that brings me to a country that was in the headlines last weeks, Denmark, with a defense issue, because Sandra Winter Madsen is from Denmark. She represents Topsoe, and she joined Topsoe in 1989, where she worked in engineering, technology management, marketing, strategy, and currently as product line director in clean fuels and chemical technology. And she's now heading the Topsoe's synthetic fuels business area. And normally you would say, wow, after all we have seen last weeks, especially in Davos, it would be a priority for us Europeans to come up with homegrown fuels, with fuels that we can control ourselves. But we heard about the problems. Sandra, what is, and you are a technology supplier here, what are the main bottlenecks preventing e-fuel projects from reaching FID today? Access to finance, electricity costs, regulatory uncertainty, or are they the offtake risks the issue? Do you see differences in the challenges and potential solutions between maritime and aviation? and are the barriers to offtake similar in both cases? Sandra, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Giorgio. I know that Denmark has been very much in the news here for our for Greenland. I would like to shift that to another topic, which is of course sustainable aviation fuel. And Topsoe is a global company. We are based in Denmark, and I think also we have now for more than 80 years we are developing technologies and also licensing these technologies to the market. But you also know that Denmark is the land of Lego. So what we do is that we develop technology blocks. And these technology blocks we use for several applications, among other sustainable aviation fuel. And we invest heavily in the development of good, efficient technologies. So we were so excited to see the mandates. We are also excited to hear about that the mandates hold, because it is very important that we have certainty on regulations. Now with the STIP program, it is really helping to reduce some of these uncertainties, and especially the market intermediary and the success of this pilot. It provides much more this price transparency, which is required from supply to offtake. And I hope also that Mahesh also then that the financiers then also see this certainty coming their way and are willing to invest. From a technology perspective, I would say that we will have to further reduce the cost of the production of renewable fuels, of eSAF, by scaling the renewable energy and by scaling electrolysis and green hydrogen production. Because green hydrogen accounts for 50 to 60% at the moment of the eSAF production cost. Also important for us is that that the market, the investors, cannot see a full lineup from renewable energy, biogenic CO2 and water to an e-fuel. And we have to see that in R&D, in pilot scales, but also we have to demonstrate that. So what we do is that we continuously de-risk the technology by doing this scale up to demo units, and we increase the efficiencies to reduce the production of eSAF. But the whole value chain have to be engaged, from us technology suppliers to the producers of SAF to the off-takers. And we have to do that very fast. So I think it is a new product, it's a developing market, and the 2030 mandates is just around the corner. But I'm also optimistic, and especially with the new initiatives on STIP and the double-sided auction. The difference between maritime and aviation, I think that there are many, or the whole industry is looking at decarbonizing aviation, but I also think that we agree that it requires large amounts of liquid fuels, large amount of sustainable aviation fuel. And with the mandates in place in the EU, it provides really strong incentives to produce these fuels in the EU, in Europe. I think for maritime, and I think it was already said before, there are more options for decarbonization. And unfortunately, we recently saw the postponement of the IMO net zero agreement, and we cannot see a clear push for new initiatives at the moment. So it will be a bit a wait and see for maritime, but I'm sure that Olivia from Moeve can say more about that.
Thank you. Many thanks. And that's a perfect segue to Olivia, our next speaker, Olivia Infantes Morales. She is the head of, she was, before she was with Mueve, already head of hydrogen development at ENGIE. As I said, she's now the regulatory affairs director. And she also has worked before that with Red Eléctrica de España as an operational markets technician. So she knows very well the role of power markets and of molecules. And one part of the question was already forwarded to you by Sandra. But as a fuel supplier, Mueve is a fuel supplier in Spain, one of the biggest. What are the main bottlenecks preventing e-fuels projects from reaching FID out of your perspective? Same question. Access to finance, electricity costs, regulatory uncertainty, offtake risk. And I would also like to add the European Commission estimates that investments of around 57 to 67 billion for aviation and 35 to 47 billion for maritime transport, roughly 100 billion in total, are needed to produce about 20 million tons of renewable and low carbon fuels by 2035. That's the projection. On the other hand, in the past years, there has been a considerable amount of funding tools to support e-fuels for maritime and aviation. But against this backdrop, and given the experience of Mueve with such available public funding tools, are these funds sufficient? And Olivia, you have the floor.
Thanks, Jorgo. Two very important questions, and maybe I'm going to repeat some of the issues that some of my colleagues have already expressed, but I'm going to try to be very, very, very quick. Well, first of all, we are a fuel supplier. We are committed to fulfill the targets. SAF targets, ESAF targets, targets in aviation, targets in maritime, or demand from maritime, because in this case the target is in the maritime sector. Well, I would say that the first bottleneck or issue to solve is that we have to have a clear demand signal from the sector. In the maritime sector, Fuel Maritime does not give us a clear signal. We were thinking on IMO and the net zero framework to be there to really push for decarbonizing maritime worldwide, but it has been postponed. So now we are facing, or the maritime sector is thinking on what is going to happen. Regarding refuel aviation, there is a clear mandate, yes, but at the same time, we all know that there are doubts on the way these mandates are going to be applied. So, as I have said at the beginning, yes, we are committed to develop, but which barriers are we really consider that we have to somehow solve? First, already mentioned, e-fuels are based on H2. So each H2 production is the key. And we are dealing with a lot of issues in order to be able to produce that hydrogen. First, renewables to fulfill the RFNBO targets, RFNBO low carbon targets, doesn't matter. Second, availability of scarce resources that are limited. For example, power connection to the transmission grid. It is limited. And if we really want projects, key projects to be developed, we need to assure that projects are going to have that scarce resources, not only power connection, but the rest, the ones that we consider really key, and work on it. Third point, I would say high prices of the final power supply. Power supply is not only the electron that the electrolyzers are going to consume, are also the regulatory costs that are passed when you are consuming electricity, meaning electricity costs, grid costs, meaning ancillary services and other regulated costs that you have to pay when you have a power supply. The next point I would say that we have to somehow manage is the technological risk. The technological risk is of course in the electrolyzer side, because we have already tested electrolyzers. We are already running a small capacity electrolyzers, but the fact is, if we really want to reduce the LCOH, we have to build a huge power plants, really big, really large power plants, meaning that you have a risk on that commissioning, and the same risk is on the side of the e-fuel production. And in this case, I'm thinking on e-kerosene and aviation sector. If I move to the maritime sector, where we're thinking on ammonia, the thing is easier, because I would say that the ammonia has been produced for the last century, so there's no problem. But in parallel, you have problems, for example, or things to solve, not problems, but things that you have to solve, for example, regarding the storage in the ports where you're going to be supplying or to do the bunkering for the maritime sector. So if you really want to, when you think on developing a project, you have to be able to have a global view on the total value chain, to be able to see all the problems that you have and work on solving them. Finally, I would like to mention also certification. We are hardly working on certification in Europe. Yes, and we have to develop fulfilling all that certification. And we have to think also on the certification, or the way certification is going to be applied to the imports to the European Commission. Also a view on CBAM. So I would say that it's not an easy question. I would say we have to have a global approach to be able to deal with all the different barriers, to be able to solve it for the projects to take FID. Finally, you have asked about the double side auction, including in the STIP. I would say that is a very good news. I would say that is a potential solution, but we have seen at the same time, we have seen during the last years a lot of support mechanisms in order to help first movers to be able to develop these projects. So if finally for ISAF, this is the tool, I would say that we have to be sure that projects that are finally selected or really want to participate in that mechanism are genuinely viable. I mean, they have to have all the resources to become a reality. All the things that I have mentioned before have to be provided to these projects, allocated or success that has success in this auction, because they could lay the groundwork for the future developments. So they really have to be an example for the rest of Europe and the world. If as Europe we want to be leaders and be able to export our knowledge, our patents out of Europe.
Muchas gracias. Many thanks for these concrete points. I would now like to come to a second round. I would like to give my gratitude, my thanks to our participants in the Q&A. There are quite some questions. Harald Burekamp has a lot of questions and also suggestions. Thanks, Bernd Haberecht, to have answered already some of them or have alluded to them. I would also like to thank Sarah Wilkin, and would say that Mahesh is possibly looking into the chat, because one question is explicitly going into his direction, and this is fantastic. I'll come back to you, Mahesh, later on. But if we now come to Eddie again, Eddie Liégeois, we talked about this double-sided auction. We talked about the early mover, the activities of the early mover coalition. So what are the next steps in achieving a successful auction? How can this intermediary a mechanism be tailored to better to national needs? And what will happen with the unused funds of the member states? Can they be used in second rounds to further scale the production of offtake? No pressure. You have 2 minutes maximum.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. No. I'm unmuted. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Before addressing your question on the next step, because indeed we should have a clear idea on what we are going to do in 2026. Perhaps just a preliminary remark, because there are still, I understand, sometimes question, and you put in fact the question also to Mr. Oetjen, why double auction? Why not contract for difference? I would say why not in the end, and because there is a time to exchange on the pro and cons of this option or of that option. But now I would say the debate should be over and we should go ahead. On top of that, Germany is ready to go ahead and put national money with double-side auction. So let's go for it. And I would say the main aspect which I retain from that, and the main advantage, is that with double-side auction, we, let's say, reconcile two perspectives: the one from the producers, which need a long-term certainty, 10, 15 years, and on the other side, the off-taker, which can only commit for very short term, 1-2 years maximum. And we need to address this gap. And in our view, double-side auction is really the instrument which can address this question. Now, on the next step, as we said at the beginning, we have a coalition of 8 member states with 2 member states which are ready to go to commit money in 2026. So we had already a meeting we not only with the 2, but with the 8 member states. And let's say we will go for a 2-step approach. First, focusing on Germany, Luxembourg, which are ready to put money on the table in 2026. But for sure, the other 6 member states, we will keep the dialogue with them to make sure that perhaps even before we launch the call that we are organizing now for Germany and Luxembourg, they might join the first, let's say, the first team, the first wave of a project. If not, then they are, I would say, welcome to join for let's say, a second auction. We are already in close contact with these 2 member states, with DG competition, because it will be national money, so there must be a stated clearance. And I must say there that we have a very positive and very constructive attitude from the colleagues of DG competition. When this will be a little bit clarified, I understand that we will have to make a market consultation to see a little bit what are the potential projects which could be eligible for a first auction. And there I written a remark made by Oliver, which is very important. We will have to identify projects which are ready to go, mature project. And when all that will have been prepared, then we will launch with the intermediary the call for auction on the production side. So the off-taker will come later on. What we have also to keep in mind that this process should be followed later on by a mechanism with EU funds. We are now in the middle of the discussion on the next MFF, and while it is good that some member states are going ahead with projects with national funds, the idea is to have an EU mechanism with EU funds to let's say, to cover the risk of the double-side auction. And then on your last question about unused fund, there I cannot reply for the member states, but it is true that in the STIP, but it was very late in the process, we recommended them to, let's say, reassess the national funds under the RRF, the Resilient Fund, and if they had, at the end of 2025, still unused fund, to reallocate very quickly this fund through a modification of the national plans. But to my knowledge, this has not happened. So, but I would say from our side, we do not interfere with, I would say, this decision in the member states on the origins of the fund. It can be also, by the way, and we have also recommended that in the STIP, to use revenues from ETS to feed and to cover, I would say, the national funds to be allocated to the mechanism.
Excellent. That really covers all the questions. Thanks to you. Merci beaucoup, Eddie. I would like to go on with Annika Krohn. And we have seen that the IMO initiatives have been radically stopped also by Donald Trump, to put it clearly. It was the president himself who put pressure on players within the IMO not to support sustainable fuels. Major setback, I would say. But could a similar coalition of member states be considered to support the development of the sustainable maritime fuels, like in the aviation sector, which is quite an advancement there? Has the Commission assessed whether such market intermediary could be relevant to help reach Fuel EU targets? Annika.
Thank you. So, yes, intermediary mechanism, as it's also reflected in STIP, in principle, we consider it useful because, and what is the benefit compared to just contract for difference is that it's competitive on both sides. So it should in principle be a better use of public funding to cover the price gap. And congratulations to aviation colleagues to having moved forward. Yes, we have discussed also with member states on the maritime side. It's more complicated on maritime because we have more than one option for fuels. And we are also in contact with H2 Global, who are now looking into the use case or concept of maritime. And I think they are ready to share the findings by the end of February, and that helps us to take back to the member states and continue the discussions. But I use this opportunity, Jörg, also to react on a couple of things which were in the chat, and I think it's really important to reassure the participants first that on regulatory certainty. In Fuel EU Maritime, we have no intention to revise the targets, and we don't now, as you said, we were looking to alignment with IMO in Fuel EU, but IMO regulation, IMO net zero framework has not been agreed, unfortunately. It means that Fuel EU revision for now, we don't plan until 2027. Until then, the framework is set. And Olive was also a bit concerned that we don't know where we are going in maritime. We know Fuel EU Maritime sets the direction. Indeed, we don't have e-fuel target in Fuel EU Maritime as such, but we have sunrise clause. We work on incentives and markets, and we hope that we achieve the uptake of e-fuels with this, for example, multiplier, which helps to promote these fuels in Fuel EU Maritime. And one important and very interesting development, which I would like to highlight in maritime, is the compliance market. So if you over-comply, which you can easily do with e-fuels, you can sell this over-compliance on the market to other vessels. And there are providers such as Better Sea and Ocean Score, very active, and even for small and medium enterprises, if you have over-compliant vessel, look into those options that helps you to earn back your investment. And this actually also functions as book and claim, because you can buy your compliance from others. So I really believe there are very interesting mechanisms for flexibility in maritime side, which can help us to develop and facilitate the update of the market to earn back money and make it compliance feasible. So
many thanks also for referring to the questions or the comments in the chat, and also to give us some clarity on the certainty that we have to expect from regulation. Thanks very much indeed. And I think, yes, we as Europeans can show a reaction to the IMO development. And this flexibility that you mentioned to sell basically the credits is a good point.
And last, very quickly,
please go ahead.
There is also was called that similar to ETS allowance mechanism as it's in aviation, to extend aviation plus have a similar mechanism for maritime. This is already in the STIP, because we have committed in the context of upcoming ETS review to look into similar mechanism also in maritime. So that is happening, and I'm very glad that this was one of the most important elements in STIP.
Thank you, and good to see that progress here. Now, I want to come back to this question of double-sided auctions. I mean, Eddie said, let's go for what is on the table, and this is then the double-sided auction, but we still have CFD in place. Olivia, in your opinion, is the double-sided auction the right instrument to reach FIDs in the first projects to scale? Well, so would you support that idea?
Well, first, I would like to answer Anita, because maybe, I'm sorry, I have not explained myself properly, but the fact is that what I meant is that in aviation, you have a clear mandate for 2030, 2031, 2032, and in maritime, you have a scheme that incentivizes maritime operators to decarbonize. And if you don't have an FMBO in 2031 or 2032, sorry, you will have a mandate established in 2034, in 34, sorry. But it's not that as clear as in aviation. But I agree with Annika that the scheme is incentivize clean fuels in the maritime sector. Sorry, because I have not explained properly before. Now, regarding the double-side auction, I would say that it's a good mechanism. As I said before, we really believe that it's a good mechanism, but I think that it has to be, we have to take care with the way it is implemented. We have to be sure that projects that are selected under this mechanism are able to become a reality, because they will have to be the example, they will have to be the seed for the sector to grow. So they have to be assure the connection capacity to the power network, for example. They have to be sure, if it is for maritime, they have to be sure that they will have a terminal in a port to be able to offer bunkering services. So that's our opinion. The double-side auction could be a good solution, but it has to be properly implemented, because we have learned a lot from the mechanisms that we already have had in the past and that we have today already enforced. And we really consider that we have to learn from the experience and improve the ones that are going to come in the near future.
Many, many thanks. Excellent. Let me move to Sandra. Similar direction, similar question. As a supplier active across multiple projects in countries, how important is it for Topsoe that these mechanisms remain harmonized on EU level rather than fragmented across member states? And the early mover coalition is an attempt to bring member states together into the EU direction. How important is that for you?
Yeah, so just also following after Olivia, I fully agree that that we should really focus on making the 2026 pilot a success. I don't think there's no time to look at whether it's contract for difference or the double-sided auction. Time is running, and we have to focus on how do we make the pilot a success, because the second ESAF auctions are already in 2027, 2028 for larger volumes. And that really catalyzes the further development of ESAF production in Europe. On the question on how important is it to have a harmonized mechanism at EU level, I think from a technology point of view, I think that we are supporting these bankable projects in Europe, also outside of Europe. And it is, I think also that we should focus on these bankable projects, because our concern is that this big money pot is actually diluted over many projects. So we should focus on the mature bankable projects, and we also think that the best technology should support these projects across EU, and therefore we think that it should be harmonized at EU level. And also in order to make EU competitive in the global landscape as well. So that is how we think of this double-sided auction, and we look very much forward to contributing to that.
That's very, very good, and hopefully it also will expand it, as we said, to maritime. We are quite confident that this will happen. Mahesh, last but not least, I come to you and would like also to have your assessment on this double-sided auctions, the market intermediaries, as we discussed. But what would be the role of the Green Finance Institute in that development? And you also have seen the comments in the chat. What's your final assessment?
Yeah, so as part of our work on Project Sky Power, supporting our partners, Systemic, who are leading the work on feeding back the industry views on the double-sided auction, it's something that Sky Power advocated for to be part of the STIP, and the STIP strongly reflected, I guess, a lot of the asks from the Sky Power cohort. On the basis of questions around, is it the right mechanism? A contract for difference superior. We have worked on the UK RCM, which is a guaranteed strike price, effectively a contract for difference. The devil is in the detail between them both. There is no perfect way. They both have their positives and negatives, and the member states and the Commission have decided on the double-sided auction. Indeed, we heard before from Eddie on why they were preferred and why they were put forward that way. So to Olivia's point, the design is crucial. And what we, I think, with the Sky Power members and the Secretariat are hoping to put forward is how it can best be designed to support those leading mature projects in order to get those final investment, that the successful bidders selling into the auction are able to use it to get to final investment decision in the very near term, to support the mandate and to support all of those other projects in the pipeline, attract investment, knowing that these auctions can be successful. So how the funds that the member states have so quickly brought together can be stretched as far as possible is an area that we'll be focusing on as well. How the facility is capitalized, indeed, how it relates to a sequence of auctions and the broader EC fund. These are all design questions that are being worked through, and we hope to feed back some ideas on how that capital can be used as responsibly, but also as efficiently in ensuring as many final investment decisions as possible. Because unlike other double-sided auction mechanisms that are currently in place that are supporting sort of imports and supply chains and trade, there is a large part of the double-sided auction for ESAF in particular that is to support bankability for project finance and actually developing these projects, which are, as I mentioned before, extremely capital intensive, high cost. So there needs to be an amount of trade-off and understanding that the capital is going to have to cover as much volume as possible to get these projects to final investment decision by supporting volumes that are bankable. So, so far, very positive that this has been brought about and implemented so quickly after the STIP. The devil will be in the detail. And going back to those questions in the chat around CFDs, etc., it looks like this is the mechanism that has been decided upon and has been advocated for. Double-sided auctions can absolutely work, and they can, and designed in certain ways, can be better than contracts for difference designed in certain ways that are better or worse as well. So really, what the intention of the mechanism obviously needs to be laid clear, and then the way it is capitalized and used to enable projects to reach final investment decision will be crucial. And so far, conversations are constructive on how we'll be able to do that, and we will see as time progresses and the first pilot auction is designed and implemented, how successful they are and what learnings we can take from it.
Excellent. Thanks very much to you, Mahesh, also to your personal role in making this all happen, because this was quite a process, and it led to a progress. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for this discussion. Let's hope that these kind of fuels will very soon become a signal, a symbol of a regained competitiveness in Europe, but also for the understanding that we have to have own grown fuels. Otherwise, we might, in this new geopolitical situation, have a high price to pay. So it's better to invest early, and that's now, rather to wait. I would like to just remind you about our next H2 talk. So our upcoming H2 talk will be 25th of February, same time, same line, and it will be about the grids package, whether they propel the hydrogen infrastructure to the next level. Very, very interesting proposal by the European Commission, and we will discuss it with experts on, as usual, high level. And let me also remind you, next slide, that our exhibition and our high-level political conference, named the European Hydrogen Week in 2026, will happen from 26 to 30 of October. And there is a pre-early bird rate, which is available until 1st of March. Book your booth space. With that, I would like to thank you and say goodbye until 25th of February. Bye-bye.